Hello students, today we are working on lesson 3.1. This starts our whole chapter off. For chapter 3 we are working with decimals. In this chapter we'll be adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing decimals. We'll learn about their place value and rounding, and we'll also put them into equations to solve. But today we are just doing decimals and place values. So our number system is based on a decimal system, and it's based on the number 10. So we have 0 through 9 digits, and each one of the places has a different value. So we're going to draw a little value chart. We did this earlier in the year when we just did regular place value. And I'm going to not talk too much about the regular places because we've already done that before, but we're going to talk about the decimal places. So I'm going to put a decimal right here, okay? And then we are going to talk about each one of these places. So this is going to be a line here because we're going to have different places here. Okay, I made it a little bit long. We probably did not need all of that. Let me erase this. Oops, that is not what I meant to do. Okay, we'll just leave it there and work with it. Okay, so if I put a number into this, into each of these boxes, so let's say I have 2,613, which is before the decimal, and we've already talked about those numbers and how to say those numbers. But then this next part, we have not, the back part of this, okay? I'm not doing this part. Okay, so we're going to talk about what each of these place values are. Just let's start really quickly, write the ones that we already know. Ones, and remember, you should be taking notes on this in your notebook. Okay, so we have ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands. So when we work with the ones on the right side of the decimal point, they're almost the same thing as the left part, except that we have to have a way to differentiate it. Okay, so we are not going to have any ones place when we are working with decimals. Instead, the first place we have is called the tenths place. Notice that it has a TH on it, so it's not the same as the tens place. Okay, and then the next place right after the tenths is the same as the one that's to the left of the tens place, and that's hundredths. So we're going to write hundredths. Remember, again, it has TH on it. Okay, and after that, so over here we had tens and we had hundreds. So the next one is going to be thousandths. Remember, TH, thousandths. And then the next one will be 10,000ths. If y'all were in class, I'd be saying, and what do you think is going to come next? So 10,000ths was next. Okay, so the way that we say this word is 2,000. So start way over on the left, right? I can't point to it right now. I don't have a pointer. But 2,613. And so wherever you see the decimal point, you're going to say the word and, or you're going to write the word and if you are having to write out the word form of a number. So 2,613 and then the way you say this last part is you say this number, okay, just the way it looks, and then you say the last place. So I'm going to say 8,754 10,000ths. Okay, so I just said that part after the decimal, just like I would if it was a normal number, and then I add the place value of the last number, which is 10,000ths. Okay, so for example 1, we're going to write out a few word forms. Let's write out a few word forms. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep that where we can see it. And then let's go ahead and work on 3 different ones. So here's one. Okay, most of y'all say this number is 14.8, but we're learning how to say numbers correctly. So the way you say this number is 14 Okay, so you just say the number before the decimal, which we already learned in another video. And then where there's a decimal, you say and then everything after the decimal, you write just as you would say it, 8, but then you say the place value. So what place value is the 8 in? It's in the tenths place, so and 8/10. Okay, and that's how we say it, and that's how we would write the word form, 14 and 8/10. Okay, letter B, still in the same example, we're writing a word name for each of these decimals. We have 185.007. Okay, so I'm not saying it correctly the first time because we're going to talk about how to say it correctly. So if I look at the part before, so think of this in 2 sections, before the decimal point and after the decimal point. So before the decimal point, I have 185. So that's how I'm going to write it, 185. And then where I have my decimal, I'm going to put and then now I'm going to write this one. So some of y'all would just say 0.007, but the correct way to say it is just ignore those zeros because they come before the 7, and we're going to say and 7, because all I see there that I circled is a 7, and then the place value is the third one after the decimal point, so that's this one, right? Tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So we're going to say 185 and 7 thousandths. Let's see if I can fit it all on here. If you don't put the TH, then it's going to be wrong, like completely wrong. Not just points taken off, it's completely wrong. Okay, C, we have 0.0062. Okay, so nothing in front of the decimal, so we don't need to write and for the decimal point. We only use and to separate the before the decimal and after the decimal. But if you don't have one, anything before the decimal, we're not going to say 0 and, okay? We're just going to talk about this number. So that number is 62. And then we need to say the place value because it's to the right of the decimal point. So I have 4 places over. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's in the 10,000ths place. So I would say this number as 62 10,000ths. There's no and. This is telling you where your last number lands. Okay, it lands on the 10,000ths place. Okay, good. Now, the next part we're going to talk about is writing place value from an expanded numeral. And there's different ways that you might see this in different books. Different teachers teach it different ways. So we're just going to go with the way this book writes it. It's a pretty easy form. Okay, so we're going to take 127 and 83 hundredths. See how I said that the correct way? Okay, and then we're going to write it out in expanded form. So the first one, okay, this is a little bit different than maybe how I taught you. Actually, there's 2 ways of writing expanded forms. This is called expanded numeral, okay? Okay, we're going to do that. There's actually 2 different ways to write expanded form. So we're going to write it both ways. Let's start with the way that we learned earlier. So we have 100 plus 20 plus 6. So that's all before the decimal, right? This is 100, this is 20, and this is 6. And then after the decimal, we're going to have point, and then we have 0.8 and 0.03, 3 hundredths. Okay, so this is 8/10 and 3 hundredths. So when you're writing expanded form, you only use one non-zero number, and then the rest of everything else should be zeros. Okay, so I shouldn't ever have like this. You do not write it like this in expanded form because you have to have each of those numbers in a different plus sign. Okay, so that's my first way to write expanded form. Okay, here's the second way to write expanded form. And this is different. I did not show you this way in the last chapters because I didn't want to confuse you too much. But now we need to learn this other way of expanded form. Okay, so instead of writing out the number 100, we're going to use the first digit, and then we're going to say times what place it's in, basically, is what we're doing. So we're going to say 1 times, oops, not 2, 1 times 100. The next one is 2 times 10. So see how this is in the hundreds place, this is in the tens place. Then 6 times 1. Then when you get here, these are in, we're going to be talking about these like they're in a fraction form. So this one is going to be 8 times 1/10 because it's in the tenths place. And the next one is 3 times 1/100ths because it's in the hundredths place. Okay, so that's the way that we're going to be doing both of these expanded forms depending on which one they're asking you to do. Okay, and then I want you to look at things when you're going backwards. Okay, so if I start it with, hold on, okay. Let's say I start with, we're going to call this example 3. Now we're going to go backwards. I'm going to give you the expanded form, and we're going to write out the number. So we have 2 times 100 plus 5 times 10 plus 7 times 1/10 plus 8 times 1/100th. Okay, and now we're going to write this as a regular number. So I have 200, right? 2 times 100. That means it's going to be in the hundreds place. You could also do it like this. Okay, here's my decimal point. So that means this one's going to be hundreds place. This is going to go into the tens place. Okay, do I have a ones place in here? I don't have anything. Remember, this is the ones place. I don't have anything times 1. So if you don't have anything, you're going to put a 0 in there. And then I have 7/10ths. So remember, this is the tenths place. So I'm going to put the 7 there. And then I have 800ths. So that's going to go here. Okay, and that's as simple as it is. Now, some kids will get confused and might forget this one. So then maybe your problem looks like this. Just go back. And so this is wrong, right? But go back and check it. Say, oh, this says 25, but I had 2 times 100, so that's not going to work. Okay, on to the next part, which is the last thing we're doing, and that is comparing decimals. Okay, so when we compare decimals, you always have to make sure that you have the same number of places. So if I have 8 and 7,039, and I want to compare it to, so I want to say greater than or less than 8,705. So right away, kids think that the one with the more numbers is greater than, but that is not always true. So we always have to make sure that they have the same numbers after the decimal point. So here I have 4. So this is a little bit different than when you compare whole numbers because you do not want to make them have the same numbers. But after the decimal points, you do. So I have 4 on the left-hand side, so I need to add one more number here. And I'm going to add a 0 because that does not change the value of the number. So now on the left-hand side, I have 8 and 7,039 10,000ths. And then on the right, I have 8 and 7,050 10,000ths. So now I can just look at this number. So it's the same all the way until we get to this last part. That's 39. This is 50. So 8 and 7,050 10,000ths is the bigger number. Okay. And you would do the same thing if you were writing out from least to greatest. You always make sure that you have the same number of places. So let's just do one quick one like that. If I have 7.3, or let me say these correctly, 7 and 3/10ths, 7 and 300ths, and then 7. And they say to put in order from least to greatest. These do not have the same numbers after the decimal point. So I'm going to change them. This one has 2, so that means I'm going to change this first one to have 2. The second one already has 2. And if I want to make this have 2 places after the decimal, if you do not see a decimal, it's always at the end of the number. So I'm going to put a decimal there and then 2 zeros. Okay, now I can see which one is least and which one is greatest. So from least to greatest is 7. That's this one, right? So I'm just writing the original one, 7. Then the next least is 7 3/100. And the last one is 7, well, up here, it's 7 3/10. Okay, you always write down the original ones, even though you change them to have the same number of places. Okay, that's it for today. Hopefully you will understand the homework, and we'll talk about it in class the next day. Thanks, everyone.